No,
Can one of
Dex.
you guys provide me a link to that verse?
Dex,
I don't
if
even know how to
somebody,
spell
Dex,
the
Dex,
book
let
you
me,
prefer.
Dex, look, Dex, how can one offer a commentary on a particular verse or even clause within that verse
Hmm.
if the meaning of those words are not attainable to the person issuing the commentary? Do you see a problem there, Dex?
I don't see what Philippines 2 does anything.
Well, no, but you did not actually show the problem when you offered the context, right?
Okay, wow. Okay, I'm going to have to really dumb this down for you, Dex. When one is offering a commentary on a sentence or a verse,
Right.
if one concedes that they have no clue as to the meaning of several words within that sentence, then their commentary on that sentence, for which they have conceded that they don't understand some of the key words within that sentence, their commentary is rendered vacuous, whether they realize that or not.
It doesn't defeat the point that Joe is trying to make.
Did you understand what I just? Did you understand what I just said? Sometimes my head wants to explode that you are so flaming stupid. One more time. When one issues a commentary on a particular verse, okay? Now I'm going to do this real slow for you. When Joe issues a commentary on a particular verse, and several of the key words within that verse that he's giving a commentary, he concedes he doesn't know what they mean, that therefore renders his commentary as vacuous.
So here's the issue, right?
He doesn't get this. He doesn't get it.
He did know what the words mean, right?
No,
in a general sense.
He said on the audio that he didn't know what they meant.
No, he
what
didn't
words
understand
are you talking about?
Context.
2 Thessalonians, Ocean.
2 Thessalonians 2, verse 11?
10 and 11.
Right. So the words that are being contested is the deception, right? So
I don't see really any hard to understand words in those two verses.
Yeah, exactly, right? So
Every
deception,
kind of wicked deception for those who are perishing because they refuse to love. This is not what.
Yeah.
What words were impossible to understand?
Well, Darwin's is saying that in this case,
right,
that deception means, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to.
No, we're not focusing. They're not focusing on what I said they mean. What we are discussing is Joe giving his commentary on the verse. So, are we clear about that? Joe was not disputing. Joe. Okay. Well, this is like
not
dealing.
Joe's argument.
You are Dex. You are one of the most frustrating individuals.
Well, Joe isn't really here to have the conversation, so why would you discuss
Joe was offering a commentary on 2 Thessalonians, and specifically verses 10 and 11. And in his commentary he referred to it as divine deception. Okay?
Right.
Now, I asked him in his commentary when he was articulating that God was, quote, guilty of divine deception. I said, what does the word delusion within 2 Thessalonians 10 and 11 actually mean within that given context? And what does the lie actually refer to, not only within that particular chapter, but elsewhere in the Bible? And Joe's response was, now, you correct me if I'm wrong, Dex. Joe's response is, quote, I don't know.
So
I don't think it matters.
Did Joe utter those words?
I think that the delusion here makes a reference to the second clause of the sentence.
Okay, Ocean, we're not focusing on what the verse says. We're focusing on what
so it doesn't matter
Joe
what the verse says? You're just talking about
you're
just talking about Joe's particular argument.
That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about.
Well, if you want to talk about Joe's argument,
I'm interested in this
concept
of divine
I can render the argument.
One at a time, please.
Dex,
one at a time.
let me take this for a second. I'm interested in this concept of divine deception. I think that this verse, Joe has a point that there is divine deception happening here, because the word delusion refers to the second clause of the verse, saying leading them to believe what is false. That seems like it would be, if you have a God that is leading people to believe what is false, that would be divine deception.
Are you familiar? You have to understand that the New Testament is piggybacking off of the Old Testament, right? And that when it speaks of God sovereignly or providentially, in some cases it refers to God is directly acting and intervening. In other situations, it is simply speaking as God being the rule of the universe, that he permits certain ongoing circumstances to coalesce where he does not directly intervene and does not prevent it, and it speaks as an aspect of God's providence.
This
One
is
is
an
God.
active verb use, though.
One is that is correct. And if
This
you
is for the
take a
reason
look,
God
if
sends
you
them,
take it,
however
okay,
it is.
that's right. And the
Yeah.
question comes into meaning is, what does it mean that God sends? Okay. Now, when I asked Joe, see the question here,
That implies
Ocean.
responsibility, though.
Okay, Ocean. The
Yeah.
issue at hand is not what does this verse mean or what does that word mean. That's not the central issue. Now it's a related issue. The issue was this. The question was asked of Joe, since he was impugning the God of the Bible as having himself perpetuating deception. I asked Joe Sonseed, what does the word delusion actually refer to in its immediate context, and what does the lie, with the definite article, the lie, in that passage and elsewhere in the New Testament specifically refer to? Because if Joe does not know what the word, the delusion, what it's referring to, and he does not know what the lie refers to, then his commentary is rendered vacuous by his own admission
Does it matter
that
what
he
it's
doesn't.
referring to?
Yeah, well, okay. What
I don't think it does.
Okay, Ocean, it renders his commentary as vacuous.
I think that you can read this and understand the words that are on the page.
Okay, that's
Without,
not the
okay,
Ocean.
it doesn't
That's
matter whether or
not
not it's
the
referring
issue.
to anything.
Ocean, that's
what
not
does
the
it matter
issue.
that it's referring to something? If it
Okay,
refers to something
Ocean,
that refers to something that contradicts what this verse says,
are you deliberately being dishonest here?
well, there's two. Hold on, no, I'm not
The
being
issue
dishonest.
is not what the passage means. That's not the issue.
Yes, it is.
No, it is not.
Right. Wait, the only reason why it referring to something would matter is if it refers to something that contradicts what this says.
Okay.
In which case we have one of two problems. One problem, we have this refers to something that is consistent with what the verse says, and then we have God being guilty of divine deception. The other problem would be that this refers to something which causes this verse to be dishonest, at which point we have a biblical contradiction.
Okay, you're obviously not getting this either. I have to dumb it down even further, Ocean. Now, Ocean, if I were to issue a commentary on a specific sentence or verse, and there are several key words within that sentence or verse, and I'm giving a commentary as to what the verse means, but I concede that I do not know what the word actually pertains to, all right, or what it means in its given context. We're not talking about what a word means in a dictionary or in a colloquial sense. So if one gives a commentary on a sentence or a verse, but then they concede that they do not know what those words actually mean, or the scope of their meaning from within that particular context, then by that concession, it renders their commentary as vacuous.
I don't think that it does.
It automatically does.
How?
It necessarily follows, because they're giving a commentary
If
on
they're giving
words that they
they're
don't.
giving a commentary on the verse.
Okay,
if you want to bring up a
Ocean,
context, if you want to bring up a context that makes the verse different,
can you
then
give me a
I'm
commentary?
happy to hear you bring up the context that makes the verse different.
Okay, Ocean.
So
can
far,
give
you
me
haven't done it, and you're
Okay,
just like
Ocean.
trying to toss Joe's conversation
No,
out.
I don't. It is not incumbent upon me to do something. I'm simply pointing out the vacuous nature.
Well, I think that in order for you to demonstrate that it's vacuous, you need to have something else, like something.
No, I don't.
Because it show that this verse makes reference to something that makes Joe's point invalid.
This is amazing.
As it stands, Joe's point is valid because you haven't demonstrated this verse says something other than what it says.
Okay,
right, you'd be able to demonstrate that it's less reliable or less impactful.
No, do you understand the difference
vacuous.
between? Do you understand the difference between something being vacuous as opposed to something being incorrect?
I understand that you're criticizing Joe, But if you're
Okay,
going to
I asked you a
make
question.
if you're
No,
going to
I
make a
asked you a
criticism of
question,
Joe,
Ocean.
then
Ocean,
you
I
should
asked you a
make what
question.
he said. You should their criticism
Ocean,
should
I
line up with
asked you a question. Do you understand the difference between saying
vacuous
something
and incorrect.
vacuous versus something is incorrect?
Sure.
Did I say that Joe's commentary was incorrect?
If it's not incorrect, then why are you arguing with it?
Okay.
I think you should be addressing it.
I'll try
you should be addressing
one more
it head
time.
on rather than saying you don't
Ocean,
understand.
I asked you a question. Is there a substantive difference between saying a statement is vacuous versus saying the statement is incorrect?
I already answered that.
And what was your answer?
Yes. But
okay, good. So when I say that it is vacuous, for example, if I said to you that the racing horse runs...
why are you running away from the topic?
I'm not. I'm giving you an analogy to the problem here, right? Now, if I say that the racehorse runs julublub around the discombobulator, and I then try to give a commentary on that, but I don't know what julublub and discombobulator actually means. Does my commentary...
No, that's a bad analogy.
Does my...
He's not. Joe knows what the word deception.
You know what?
Joe understands all the words.
All right.
Joe understands all the words.
You're saying that he doesn't understand the context of the word that's being used in this verse.
Joe,
and if you're saying that he doesn't understand the context of the verb, hold on. If he doesn't understand the context of the verb that is in the verse,
did you hear the conversation?
You should provide the differentiating verse.
Did you hear the conversation?
His context
did
is
you
incorrect.
hear the conversation?
His
It doesn't matter. You're representing it in a way that is
good. Then, Ocean, I will tell
strange.
you, Joe said in this room, and anybody can play back the recording, Joe says that he did not know the scope and breadth of meaning of the word delusion and the specific term, the lie, as it was used in 2 Thessalonians, as well as elsewhere in the New Testament.
That's
he said
because
that he
he's
did
not a biblical scholar. And if you want to go, back into let's assume that what you're saying is correct.
Commentary on words that you don't know, then it renders your commentary vacuous.
Let's assume what you're saying is correct, and he doesn't know the breadth of he doesn't have the breadth of understanding of the Bible in order to understand what that deception is actually making reference to. Sure, that's fine. That doesn't render his commentary useless. It renders it maybe ignorant. But if you're going to say that it is,
I said it was
vacuous. Fine. Let's just call it vacuous
by definition.
Let's call it vacuous for just for a second. But that doesn't change what the point is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
if you're going to say that it's vacuous, you should also, that implies that what your criticism is that your criticism is vacuous and there's a misunderstanding. You should clarify the addressing the way the conversation should proceed is that you should address the misunderstanding and then approach the rest of the conversation honestly. Instead, you're trying to catch him on vacuousness and then try and discredit him on that basis, and that doesn't mean anything.
A vacuousness that isn't actually
there's no
definition of vacuous.
There's no
I'm assuming that he's correct in his commentary. Even though I still disagree
you see,
with that.
I've made this very clear, and I don't know how much more I can make it clear. So I'll just make it clear just one more time, and then I'm not going to discuss it any further. If one is going to offer a commentary on a given sentence, and several of the key words and terms within that sentence are totally unknown to the person giving a commentary, then their commentary is vacuous by virtue of their own concession that they do not understand.
That's not true. That's not what vacuous means.
The way that you're using vacuous doesn't make the point invalid.
Vacuous has a definition.
Okay,
what you're saying
Ocean. I guess what you're missing.
You're saying you are deliberately avoiding a valid point on a technicality of vacuousness that doesn't mean anything.
I did not say that Joe's commentary was correct or incorrect.
No, what you're doing is you're using a useless definition of vacuous
by his own admittance that he doesn't know what the key words are.
On the basis of your false definition of vacuousness. This doesn't make any sense.
I perfectly understand
that you're confessing to waterlogging a conversation.
Yes.
I'm sorry you don't understand this very simple issue.
I understand it quite clearly. You have explained it quite clearly, and you have said that what you were saying amounts to he said something, and I didn't want to address it. I was deliberately waterlogging the conversation for lack of clarity, and then ended the conversation.
No, that's not what I said.
That's what you're saying.
No, that's not.
He actually did justify the context that was pertinent to this discussion.
Darwin's did or Joe did?
Darwin's did, and it in no way actually addressed Joe's argument. In no way.
Okay, so the clarification doesn't even affect the commentary.
Okay, so when Joe is giving us a commentary on a verse with a central term in that verse regards the word delusion, and I said, what does that word actually mean and refer to in its given context? And he said, I don't know. Right. Then how can his
you're stuck on this? Why are you stuck on this? Because we've demonstrated this doesn't matter.
Yeah. So was his commentary substantive, Ocean?
It doesn't even. It doesn't matter. What your criticism has.
There was no commentary.
Okay, good.
Affects the conversation.
So
if you want to put forward something that actually affects the conversation, you need to demonstrate that his commentary has something wrong with it.
It's worse than that, actually.
Yes, you do. Otherwise, your vacuousness accusation doesn't amount to anything.
You could say something to me. You could say something to me that I might not deem to be either correct or incorrect, but that it was meaningless gibberish, and I could simply say what you said to me was unintelligible.
But it's not meaningless gibberish. We understand the sentence in plain English.
Okay, Dex, I'm going to ask you a very simple question.
If I say something to you in gibberish,
would you please wait? I was speaking to Dex. Would you please stop interrupting me? Dex, did Joe Sonseed? Okay, Dex, did Joe Sonseed concede that he had no idea what the meaning of delusion was from within the context of 2 Thessalonians? Did he concede that, Dex?
He conceded that he didn't know the context.
Okay, good. Thank you.
That's it.
That doesn't mean anything, though.
But the context, the meaning of the context only matters if it overrides the general... if it overrides the reading of the sentence in plain English.
Is there a context that overrides the general meaning?
Do you know what hermeneutics is?
Sure.
Okay, what is hermeneutics?
Comprehending text through the context of words and their ancient meaning, as far as
in the use of Christianity, it's understanding the Bible within its context.
It is the principles that are employed for the purposes of interpretation.
Sure.
Okay. Now, have you ever read any material either within the biblical field or outside the biblical field about hermeneutics?
No.
Okay, good. If one were to go to a Bible college or seminary, okay, and one takes courses in hermeneutics, right? As it relates to the Bible, there's a joke that is repeated over and over again that there's 3 cardinal rules of interpretation. Okay, and it goes as follows: rule number 1, context; rule number 2, context; rule number 3, context. The context is key in order to properly employ hermeneutics and interpret a given passage.
Right. So
good.
You're bringing up things that don't have anything to do with the conversation.
So
let me respond.
If one does not understand, if one concedes by their own mouth that they do not understand the context, then the commentary is superfluous. The issue is not whether the commentary is correct. For example, somebody might give a commentary on a verse that they don't even understand, and it might be hypothetically correct. But the issue is not that it's correct or incorrect. The commentary is rendered superfluous from that person's viewpoint if they do not even understand what the context. Because without the context, the meaning of that given passage cannot be ascertained.
Okay. So the response to that is this.
The response is going to be the same thing we've been saying over and over again. That the only reason why context would mean anything in this situation is if it overrides the general meaning of the verse. If you want to provide a context that overrides the general meaning of the verse, then the conversation is open for discussion. Don't interrupt me. If you want to provide some sort of context that overrides what the verse is saying, then there's a conversation that can be had there. But if not, then complaining about somebody not understanding the context doesn't actually amount to anything because the context doesn't change anything.
Right, and more importantly than that, okay, you need to understand the context of how Joe used the verse, right? Joe's argument that he was attempting to render is that essentially, if one can doubt, if one can be made to assume, to doubt somehow that, if Joe's argument that he was trying to render is this, is that what if God could lie, right? What if God can deceive? If this can be the case, then that leads to skeptical theism, which is a huge epistemic problem for anybody who is a presuppositionalist, correct?
No, that's not a problem.
Anyways, so what he was trying to, and Darwin's saying, okay, give me an example of God deceiving. Joe pointed to this passage, right? Passage 11 in 2 Thessalonians 2.
Right.
So in this case, so Joe offered this passage as evidence of God's possibility of deception of people, right?
Well, how could he offer it as evidence when he didn't understand its context?
Because read at face value, it says that God
did Joe admit that he did not understand the context
I allowed
or
you
the
to
meaning
talk.
of those
You
words?
had 5 minutes, so let me just wrap it up.
Sure.
And I'll finish, okay? So, read at face value, it supports Joe's claim, right? So, is there a context to that passage that contradicts Joe's claim? Darwin says yes, and the context is that rather than God deceiving, God simply stood back and allowed the deception to happen via other means. The retort to that, and this is why it is a completely irrelevant discussion, right? This is like a sideline that doesn't even matter. Because the retort to that is that in the same way, God could simply stand back while the writer of any of the books of the Bible is making a mistake via his natural creaturely ways, right? Therefore, the deception can still occur within the Bible, even though God never physically, personally intervened and wrote the deception down. So this whole argument is
not making reference to that. It wouldn't be.
Right.
Because this has got an active verb usage in which God sends the powerful delusion. This means that God is the one actively doing this.
No, okay. Had you been familiar with the Old Testament typology, typology of God and His providence, you wouldn't have made that elementary mistake. The Old Testament, of which Paul was an Old Testament scholar, he is simply repeating this type of statements that there are times when it speaks about God sovereignly controlling events, where in some instances God directly intervenes and causes things, and in other instances in God's sovereignty he permits things to happen rather than directly causing them, such as the invasion of the Syrians.
Did you just mistake, or that I did?
No, what the mistake that you're making is you are reading far too much into the word send because of your unfamiliarity with how the Old Testament typifies the sovereignty and providence. That's right. God, when the Bible says, when God,
and then there's the second
what
clause.
don't you get? Okay, Ocean. One more time. We'll keep this really simple. What don't you get?
One at a time.
What don't you? Okay. Are you familiar? Are you familiar with the concept of Hebraisms?
Hebraisms? No.
Yes. Okay. They're idiomatic expressions that are commonplace throughout the Old Testament, and one such Hebraism is the concept where it speaks about God in His sovereignty doing something, but it is simply God in His providence where He is not preventing it from happening. Okay? Now that doesn't mean that God is actually actively... Okay, listen, let me finish. Had you actually been familiar with these Hebraisms, and Paul being a Hebrew of Hebrews and a Hebrew scholars, that when he actually was writing 2 Thessalonians... Paul was a Jew. He may have been born in Tarsus, but he was a Jew. Okay? Now, the fact of the matter is, sometimes the Bible, it speaks about God doing things in two different senses. In the first sense would be God directly doing it. For example, in the 7 days of creation. There are other instances where it says God will do this or God will send this, but it is God not preventing certain things from happening. For example, when God sent foreign nations to discipline Israel for its disobedience, that it's not teaching that God put it in the minds of the evil, let's say the Assyrians or other nations, to act sinfully, but that God in his providential grace did not keep them back. Okay?
So you're saying that the Bible is deceptive. What it sounds like what I conclude is that the Bible is deceptive by using that verb usage in this passage.
The mistake that you're making is because you are not familiar with the Old Testament Hebraisms, where it speaks about when God does something. It speaks about God doing something in two different respects. One in which God actively intervenes, and other times where God in his sovereignty and providence permits a coalescing of events to occur and did not prevent them.
Maybe the conclusion out of these Hebraisms is that according to the Hebrew, there's really no functional difference between allowing something to happen and doing it oneself.
The bottom line is this: is if God permits, for example, if God,
especially when you're all powerful, you are responsible for what you permit.
If God in his sovereignty permits me to lie to you, that does not mean that since God permitted me to lie to you, that God himself is actively deceiving.
Once again, it in no way nullifies the argument.
By the way, why do you always say once again in conversations? You say it hundreds and hundreds of times.
Well, because he has to repeat himself.
Who cares? Does it really
matter? It does seem as though Dex is right, though.
I have to go very soon, but the bottom line here is this. Joe Sonseed, because he read a philosophical paper dealing with presuppositionalism and skeptical theism and trying to suggest that we don't have a means by which we can know that God is deceiving us. That therefore then we can't know anything of certain. Well, then I can just simply dismiss that statement because he has no basis to determine that his reasoning, his basic reasoning functionality is reliable in order for him to say that.
That jumps into a different world.
Yeah.
So no, it's not. It's not.
Oh, it is, isn't it?
No, not at all. No, it's not.
I know you are, but what am I?
Because you see, in the Christian worldview, we're not arguing that God has infallibly given us revelation where we cannot be wrong. That's our starting point. It's not an argument. It is something that we accept.
I just give you a means to doubt it.
I'm not sure which one it is. I'm still getting familiar with Tukoke, but I think if it's not Tukoke, it's definitely red herring.
No, it's not. It's not a Tukoke. I'm simply pointing out.
Well, then it's a red herring.
No, it's not.
You're pointing out something that has nothing to do with the
discussion. It's neither.
Well, right, but I just gave you a means to doubt it, right? And therefore, it cannot be a foundational belief because you can doubt this belief.
You know, the error that Joe is making, it's a very amateur error, and it's generally true of people who aren't familiar with, who haven't actually studied biblical theology, either the Old or the New Testament. It's very similar, and this is an analogy. It doesn't prove why Joe's commentary is vacuous, but it's an illustration. When I encounter people from cults like the Jehovah's Witnesses,
this is a red herring.
No, it's an illustration here because they will come along and they will cite a particular verse and they'll say, well, you see this verse here? Here's what this verse means. And they'll say, well, you see this word here in this verse? See what that says? And I'll say, okay, good. I'll say, do you know the underlying Greek or Hebrew word there? Or have you actually looked that up? All right?
Why do you keep coming back to this?
And they will say, no, I don't even, they'll say, no, I don't know, or I haven't investigated what the Greek or Hebrew is. I said, well, then how can you, well, here's the problem. If one does not investigate the underlying Greek or Hebrew, then one would have to be trusting on the reliability of the translation. And sometimes translations do not contain
Go
nuances.
back to the original discussion. You didn't provide a context that overrides what he was saying.
Okay, well, the bottom line is this: is in the same way that a Jehovah's Witness will point to a particular verse in, let's say, the King James, but they're not actually familiar with the underlying Greek or Hebrew, then they're not in a position to tell me what the English means.
The bottom line is that the
bottom line is you're dismissing somebody without a good reason.
Supports Joe's argument.
Right. The bottom line is you're dismissing somebody without a good reason.
Actually, Joe did not have a good argument by his own concession that he didn't understand what those words mean in its given context.
Right, and the context and the explanation you provided still supports his argument.
No.
So thank you for giving him the ammunition.
His argument was vacuous by virtue of his
Even with the Hebraics it works.
No. You gave him the argument. You gave him the evidence to support his argument. Thank you.
That's what
I'm concluding from this conversation. Everything that you provided has supported Joe.
What don't you understand that when somebody gives a commentary on something, but they admit, okay, let me finish. It doesn't matter whether my commentary was correct or incorrect here.
Yes, it does, because it supports Joe's argument.
Dex,
you would have been a great partner with Joe in a debate if you weren't the one being debated with.
Let's say the commentary that I gave was incorrect, just for the sake of argument. That still would not render what I am saying is invalid, because what I said about Joe's commentary being that it was vacuous was by virtue not of my commentary, but by virtue of his own concession that he didn't understand what the meaning of the key words were.
Right, and that's irrelevant, because the meaning and the context that you provided supported his argument.
Can one
even if he was completely wrong, you then gave him the ammunition he didn't have to begin with.
Dex, obviously, as I said, you're not a clear thinker. Can one give a non-vacuous commentary on a sentence or a verse if one concedes that they do not understand the meaning of some of the key terms or words in that verse?
According to your definition of vacuous, fine. But your definition of vacuous doesn't
excuse me, I asked Dex the question. Can somebody give a non...
I just answered the question.
Okay, I'll repeat the question since you decided to speak for Dex. Dex, can somebody give a non-vacuous commentary on a verse or a sentence for which they have conceded that they don't know the meaning of the key words or terms from within that verse?
The answer is depending on your definition of vacuous.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not hearing Dex. Okay.
So the answer is yes, absolutely. One can incidentally be bang on taking the sentence as face value.
We're not talking. Okay, Dex. Is
that not true?
Dex, we're not talking about an external verification as to whether it's accurate or not. We're talking about Joe. Can Joe, in and of himself, without an external verification, when he gives a commentary on a verse, can that commentary be non-vacuous if Joe himself says he does not know the meaning of key terms in that sentence?
Yes,
does something being vacuous invalidate it?
Okay, good. I'm glad you admitted that, and it's in the recording here for everybody to play back. So what you're telling us is that people can give person A can give a meaning. Let me finish.
No, you interrupted me. I did not.
Let him make his conclusion. We'll point out how wrong it is.
All right, fair enough.
Okay, what you're saying is person A, from their point of view, we're not talking about external sources. What you're saying is person A can give a meaningful...
I'm not saying that. I'm correcting myself.
Hold on, let him say his piece.
Yeah.
One of the keys to debate is let the other person dig their own hole and then bury themselves.
Yeah, that's
true.
Go
for it.
What you're saying is that Joe, in and of himself, without you referring to external verification, that Joe, in and of himself, can give a non-vacuous commentary on a verse for which he has conceded that he is oblivious as to what the key meanings and meanings of the terms in that verse are.
No, context, not key. He understands the meaning of the terms. He doesn't understand the context of the terms.
Right.
No, I said
there's a subtle difference between the two.
Okay, no, Dex, that is factually incorrect. Let me repeat to you what Joe said. I said, Joe, do you understand the meaning and the given context of within 2 Thessalonians 2?
Why don't we just
wait. Is that exactly what you asked, Darwin?
I asked him. I said, what is the meaning and context?
All right, now you've given two different questions.
For the word delusion and the term the lie with the definite article. I said, what is the meaning and how is it derived from the context? I said, do you know what that
suggesting
is?
he doesn't know
And
the
okay, are you okay? I'd like to finish my statement without being interrupted. If you interrupt me again, I'll hide you from the broadcast.
Great.
Okay.
But there's a important question in this.
Okay. Now, Joe Sonseed gave a commentary on 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 10 and 11. His commentary was based upon the words in those verses.
Wow, you're a cowardly little shit.
Okay.
That's a point that I think needs to be made. If you're going to hide me from broadcast when I'm trying to ask a clarifying question, please.
Now, Joe was giving a commentary on the words in a given verse. Okay? Yes, he was. Joe was giving us a brief commentary on 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Excuse me, not chapter 2. In 2 Thessalonians, he was giving us a commentary on verse 11. But he conceded when he was asked if he understood the meaning of the key terms and words within that verse, and he says that he didn't know what they actually mean. So how can one give a substantive commentary from within themselves when they say, I don't know what those words mean?
So, Darwin's, is it possible for someone
I asked you a question.
Well,
how can you give a meaningful commentary if you don't know what the words mean?
Right. So he does know what the words mean in plain English, and it is possible to.
I didn't ask him that question.
Hang on. It is possible to incidentally be correct about the context and the meaning.
That's not the issue.
Just by reading the passage.
That's not. You're missing the point here. You're missing.
You're just saying if it's possible, and I told you how it's possible.
We're not talking about an external. We're not talking about an external verification.
Can the external verification incidentally match the internal context?
Okay, that's not the issue. Again, you're confusing.
Yes, it is the issue.
Okay, you're confusing two different issues, Dex. One, from Joe's point of view, he does not have external verification, right? Because he admitted. Joe said that he did not know what the meaning of the word delusion and the term the lie. Okay, he says he does not know what the meaning of the words are within their given context. You keep on changing the subject that's saying that, well, Joe understood the meaning of the word delusion in a dictionary sense. That's not the issue. So if Joe says that if Joe is going to give a commentary, he is portending that he is giving a correct interpretation of a given verse. But he admitted, and it's on the recording, that when I asked him what is the meaning of the word delusion and what is the meaning of the term lie in its given context, and when I asked him 6 times, he finally says that he did not know. So what he is saying is, and I'll wrap this up because I have to go. What he's saying is he's giving an accurate commentary on a verse where the key terms within that.
He never gave a commentary on it.
Whoa. Did he leave?
Yeah, he must have dropped.
I was gonna bring up that fucker just kicked Ocean.
Yeah, he did.
He's a little coward. I was about to cause a scene, but apparently I didn't get a chance.
I mean, I can't believe that he was dodging for that long, and I mean, both me and Ocean were coming at him. And I think we were being really cordial there as well. So I don't know what the issue was, but he keeps trying to bring it back to this subject. But this is what he does when he ends up.
I really hope he was kicked somehow, just in the back of my mind.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. You know. I mean. As much as I sometimes enjoy sparring with that guy, I think giving him mods and having him kick the entire hangout. He kicked at least 10 people throughout.
That's why we were making such a shit scene. Because we were pissed.
I think is at the end of the day counterproductive because well, there's another hangout going on.
He doesn't want to hear people's opinions.
Yeah.
He just wants to be right.
He's a coward.
The only way to either moderate for him or Speaking of people who got kicked out.
Gus kept getting kicked out every time he tried to join.
Yeah.
It's funny. The cool people are coming back. Yay!
5 goddamn times. 5 goddamn times I got thrown out.
Yeah.
5 times. 3 times for hang on a second, concerned. 3 times just for having the unmitigated fucking gall to show up. You know what, Nadia? From now on, if you're not gonna fucking deal with Darwin's deity, I will conduct a fucking pogrom against him. Every time I see him, I will put him on block. Eventually, I will block him so much, and I will make sure I am in your fucking room so that he will not iron. You get the fuck up off on my ass. I will fucking tear you in half. I swear to God. I will set fire to this motherfucker. I swear to God. I swear to God, Iron.